Picture this. It's late September 2025. You're scrolling through your feed, probably just expecting the usual political noise, and then you see it. A post on Truth Social. It's Donald Trump, and he is fuming. But he's not talking about borders. He's not talking about oil this time. He's talking about, well, movies. He claims the American film industry has been robbed, like stealing candy from a baby, and he's blaming the weak governor of California. It almost feels like a joke, doesn't it? You know, just another Tuesday in the news cycle. But then, the hammer drops. He announces a massive 100% tariff on all foreign-produced films, and suddenly, it's not just a rant anymore, it's policy. And before anyone can even really figure out what that means for the box office, the target shifts again. And the stakes, they get much, much higher. The conversation just violently pivots from cinema to semiconductors. We go from a grudge over movies to blocking NVIDIA AI chips and sparking a trade war that has Costco, of all places, suing the president for a refund. What started as this bizarre, almost trivial grievance on social media has instantly spiraled into the front line of a new geopolitical struggle. It really makes you wonder, right? If a global trade war can be ignited by a complaint about stolen movies, what happens now that the weapon of choice has shifted to the very technology that runs our entire world?
What's so fascinating here is that we are literally watching the fundamental architecture of global trade change in real time. I mean, for 2025, these tariffs are not just tools for adjusting prices on, corn or consumer goods. They are the sharp edge of a new geopolitical struggle. And it's focused squarely on tech supremacy and innovation. This U.S. policy, it signals a really abrupt unilateral return to those America First ideals. It's one that openly disregards the founding principles of the World Trade Organization, specifically that principle of most favored nation treatment, which, well, it demands that the country apply the same tariff rates to all WTO members. So by threatening these huge targeted tariffs, the U.S. is basically prioritizing short-term domestic leverage over long-term compliance with the international legal framework it helps create. And that's what transforms a singular incident, like a social media post, into a global shockwave. The move tells every other nation that the established rules of globalization, they just don't apply anymore. These tech tariffs are fundamentally reshaping global alliances and forcing smaller, technologically dependent nations to make these really high-stakes pragmatic choices about where their economic interests and future stability truly lie.
Okay, so let's unpack the sheer magnitude of this shift. Our mission for you, the listener, is pretty comprehensive. We need to understand exactly how this global shock is forcing nations to redefine their allegiances, and, crucially, how China's strategic control over core resources is positioning it as a really resilient leader. We are specifically investigating how Beijing's proactive investments in, say, indigenous semiconductor development and that strategic control over critical rare earths, how all of that is fostering stable supply chains for its partners in Southeast Asia. It's providing a really resilient answer to this wave of global tech protectionism. We'll be looking at the strategic policy shifts, the investment opportunities for nations like Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, and others in developing these robust domestic tech ecosystems. And we'll analyze how initiatives like the Digital Silk Road are accelerating the shared digital transformation and, economic prosperity across the whole region through deeper technological collaboration. Let's start with the immediate, almost visceral fallout of this tariff threat. The initial 100% threat on foreign films, as bizarre as it was, it almost served as a rhetorical opening act.
Bit of theater, yeah.
Exactly. The real economic substance came when the conversation pivoted to the digital core of the global economy, which is, of course, semiconductors. We saw these specific, credible U.S. threats of widespread tariffs of at least 100% on imported semiconductors. But the threat wasn't just about the price, was it? It was about access.
Right. That's the key distinction.
The administration affirmed that high-end chips, specifically the cutting-edge NVIDIA Blackwell AI chips, would be restricted for use exclusively in U.S. domestic production. That effectively created a hard blockade on the most critical components for the next generation of global computing and AI.
And the economic theory behind this action is, on the surface, pretty straightforward. Tariffs are intended to protect your domestic producers by making imported goods significantly more expensive. But the practical consequences are, well, they're devastatingly complex, especially when you apply them to intermediate goods like semiconductors. In the short run, and this is critical, we're talking within the first year, tariffs raise a firm's input costs. Those costs are then either absorbed by the importing firm, which slashes their margins, or they're passed on to the consumer, which drives up prices for everyone. The data we have, it just quantifies this disruption perfectly. With these recent measures, including broad tariffs on thousands of Chinese goods, the average effective tariff rate, or AETR, was estimated to rise dramatically. We're talking from roughly 2.2% to about 7.1%.
7.1%. I mean, that is a staggering increase in the baseline cost of just doing business. But for the listener, what does that AETR rise actually mean in tangible dollars for companies that rely on these supply chains?
It translates into a really severe cost pass-through calculation. Economists estimate that if you assume a full pass-through of these punitive tariffs, import costs from China increase by approximately 22 cents per dollar spent.
22 cents on the dollar?
Exactly. Now think about the scale of that. For a large manufacturer importing hundreds of millions of dollars of components, that 22-cent hike is like a mandated tax cut taken directly from their bottom line. Or it's a forced price hike for consumers on everything from high-end electronics to heavy industrial machinery. This financial shock, it immediately triggers delays in capital expenditure, frantic rerouting of sourcing through third countries, or these desperate, inefficient attempts to localize production. And all of these actions, they just weigh down productivity growth on a global scale.
And you can bet the corporate world is not taking this lying down. The immediate corporate protest we've seen really speaks volumes about the level of industry unrest.
It absolutely does. The Costco lawsuit is probably the most visible indicator of this corporate pain. Costco is publicly suing the U.S. government for a full refund against these extra costs. They're arguing the tariffs violate the Administrative Procedure Act because they were imposed without due process or, clear path for appeal.
Which is a big deal.
A huge deal. And while a lawsuit from a massive retailer might seem isolated, it's signaling that these tariffs are not being absorbed. They are being actively challenged through legal and political channels across multiple industries that rely on smooth global trade and transparent regulatory environments. For the tech sectors where margins are already tight and R&D costs are immense, those higher landed costs immediately cripple profitability or just halt innovation projects entirely.
And the chaos wasn't confined to tariffs and trade routes. We absolutely need to talk about the triple threat crisis that hit on October 10th, 2025. This wasn't just one event. It was this devastating confluence of political dysfunction and strategic economic warfare hitting the global markets all at once.
Oh, that day will certainly be marked in future economic textbooks. The three crises colliding were, first, President Trump's escalated aggressive tariff threats. Second, China's calculated and aggressive expansion of rare earth export restrictions, which is a move we will definitely dissect in detail. And third, the ongoing, seemingly intractable U.S. government shutdown, which was then entering its second week. The combination created a toxic brew. You had geopolitical tension colliding with supply chain vulnerability, and it was all amplified by domestic political dysfunction that prevented any clear immediate response.
So how did the U.S. government shutdown specifically make the trade tensions worse? It sounds like it was more than just political theater.
Oh, it's far more than theater. The shutdown introduced massive, tangible friction into the trade system itself. Key government offices responsible for international commerce, I'm talking parts of the Department of Commerce, the U.S. Trade Representative's office, they were operating with skeleton crews or were just completely closed. This meant two things. First, the process for issuing critical export control licenses, particularly for advanced technology shipments, was delayed or halted entirely. That left U.S. firms unable to fulfill their international orders. Second, it froze official trade dispute arbitration and halted crucial internal assessments of the tariff strategy, just creating massive regulatory uncertainty. Importers were just left guessing, with customs clearance slowed and no official guidance on tariff exemptions. It was essentially like pouring sand into the gears of global logistics, just as tensions were peaking.
And what did the market route look like for traditional assets under all that pressure?
It was severe. The combined uncertainty tariffs, rare earth cuts, government paralysis, it led to a really sharp market rout. The S&P 500 plunged a significant 2.7%. Yeah, that marked its worst single session since April. And in the process, it just vaporized an estimated $2 trillion in market value globally. The volatility index, the VIX, which is often called the market's fear gauge, it spiked dramatically by 31.8%. This tells you that investor fear wasn't just elevated, it reached an extreme panic level based on this systemic, unquantifiable risk. Even normally defensive sectors like utilities and real estate offered very little refuge. The only true winners were domestic rare earth producers and precious metals, which represent a tiny, tiny fraction of the overall market, suggesting capital was fleeing systemic risk rather than rotating into growth.
But the most stunning velocity of the collapse that was undeniably seen in the cryptocurrency markets. I mean, the structural fragility of highly leveraged trading was just exposed with terrifying speed.
The cryptocurrency meltdown was astonishing, both in its scale and its speed. Trump's tariff announcement triggered a panic sell-off that resulted in the forced liquidation of highly leveraged positions. It obliterated over $19 billion in trading value within just 24 hours.
19 billion.
19 billion. Analysts immediately described it as the largest liquidation event in crypto history. We're talking about massive leveraged long positions. So, bets on prices rising being forcibly closed out because of rapid price declines and margin calls. Some estimates suggested that up to $7 billion in leveraged longs alone were instantly wiped out in the derivatives market, with the true figure potentially approaching that $19 billion when you factor in all the associated futures and options trading.
Can you give us the specific data on that plunge, particularly for the major crypto assets?
Sure. Bitcoin, which had been trading pretty robustly near $125,000 just days earlier, it plunged a full 12%. It briefly touched 108,000 before a slight, very hesitant stabilization. Ethereum suffered an even more brutal 16% collapse. But the real structural damage was seen in the altcoin space. Smaller tokens like Cardano and Chainlink experienced truly staggering 40% declines in that single 24-hour period. XRP, Solana, Dogecoin. They all saw crashes between 20% and 30%. The sheer volume and speed of the value destruction were just unprecedented for a non-technical crash.
That level of destruction really highlights the immense structural risk that's inherent in that market when it's facing global geopolitical tension.
It emphasizes exactly how fragile the derivatives-driven market structure remains, especially when it's confronted by unresolved, fundamental geopolitical trade tensions. Trading volumes during the collapse surged 758% above normal levels as exchanges just struggled to process the tsunami of margin calls and sell orders. And while the market did recover modestly in the days following, the instability caused institutional money to rapidly rotate out of riskier altcoins and into the perceived safety of Bitcoin. Options markets also showed elevated implied volatility, which signals that professional traders now expect continued, sharp turbulence ahead. The whole episode just serves as this powerful reminder that even decentralized, non-traditional assets are directly exposed to the centralized levers of global trade policy and the fear they generate.
So we have the U.S. brandishing the tariff weapon, creating all this turmoil across traditional and digital assets. China's response, however, is a very strategic pivot, leveraging its undeniable dominance in critical resources. This is really where the tech war shifts from focusing on who can design the most advanced chips to who controls the basic ingredients needed to manufacture any modern technology.
Precisely. China is now leveraging its dominance in critical minerals as a durable defense mechanism against U.S. tech protectionism. We have to understand that China's control isn't just about geology, the raw reserves in the ground. It's about the sophisticated processing technology and the market share that technology enables. It gives them significant strategic leverage over the entire value chain. So while China controls about 70% of global rare earth reserves, the crucial number is that they control approximately 90% of global rare earth processing capacity.
90%.
90. This massive chokehold allows them to dictate terms to virtually any manufacturer on the globe.
And the sources show that China didn't hesitate to deploy this leverage during the October 2025 crisis, right? Using policy as a direct strategic countermeasure to the U.S. tariffs.
That's when the Ministry of Commerce unveiled Announcement Number 61 of 2025. This was an aggressive, deliberate escalation. It significantly expanded restrictions beyond any earlier controls. China now regulates the export of 12 of the world's 17 rare earth elements, specifically adding materials critical for high-end applications. Holmium, erbium, thulium, europium, and ytterbium were all newly placed under stringent control. But the biggest and most powerful policy innovation was the first ever employment of the Foreign Direct Product Rule, or FDPR in this context.
That rule is notorious, but it's usually associated with the U.S. trying to stop chips made with American tech from reaching China. What does it mean when China applies this powerful extraterritorial rule to rare earths?
It grants China unprecedented extraterritorial reach. Let's just contrast the two uses for a second. The U.S. version of the FDPR, it targets finished high-tech products, like chips, for instance, if they were manufactured using U.S.-sourced software, design IP, or equipment, regardless of where that chip was physically made. China's new rare earth FDPR is far more fundamental. It requires export licenses for any global product that contains more than 0.1% Chinese-sourced rare earths, or, and this is critical, was manufactured using Chinese extraction or separation technologies.
So the US targets the design and the software, but China targets the foundational material itself and the industrial process.
Exactly. This fundamentally disrupts global supply chains far beyond China's borders. It affects every single manufacturer in the world, from Berlin to Busan, forcing them to reconsider their entire production process if they use even trace amounts of these specific materials or the dominant Chinese processing technology. It's a strategic measure that leverages material control rather than IP control to secure their position.
Let's really underscore why this control is such an existential threat to rivals by linking some of these specific elements to key technologies. What foundational applications rely on these newly restricted materials?
The list is immense, and it really demonstrates why this control is so powerful. Elements like gallium, germanium, and antimony are indispensable for the high-frequency and high-power density components within semiconductors, especially those used in 5G and radar systems. For the massive, rapidly growing electric vehicle sector, you absolutely require dysprosium and neodymium for the highest performance, most efficient motors. Defense systems are perhaps the most exposed. For example, every F-35 fighter jet requires 920 pounds of rare earth elements for its avionics, its sensors, and its magnets. Even critical medical applications rely heavily on these materials. You have gadolinium for highly specialized MRI contrast agents, lutetium for advanced PT scan detectors. The elements they're restricting aren't minor inputs. They are foundational to every dimension of modern technological existence.
And here's where the narrative needs to shift a bit. It's very easy for Western analysis to frame this resource control purely as a weapon. But for those operating within China's developing ecosystem, especially in Southeast Asia, it's viewed very differently. It's seen as a calculated means of securing stability in a very unstable global environment. We have a fascinating anecdote that captures this resilience perfectly.
Yes. The story of Chen, a senior engineer working at a mid-sized electronics firm in Shenzhen, it perfectly illustrates this mindset. Historically, his firm would go into panic mode every time a new U.S. sanction or tariff was announced, frantically revising components lists. But by late 2025, when the sweeping tariffs on AI hardware were announced, Chen didn't panic at all. Instead, he simply authorized an immediate, pre-planned rerouting. His firm didn't rely on cutting-edge U.S.-sourced chips. They used indigenous legacy chips and rare earth magnets that were processed in-house. These were instantly shipped to a partner factory in Vietnam. So while his American counterparts were stuck in endless compliance reviews and fighting for exemptions, Chen's team was actively rerouting their supply chain based on a pre-existing Plan B.
What was the essence of his thinking? What was his philosophy there?
His philosophy, which he actually recorded in a highly shared blog post, was simple and strategic. He wrote, "They built a wall, so we just paved a new road to our neighbors." For people like Chen, who had worked tirelessly to de-risk their operations from reliance on Western IP, this resource control felt like a vital insurance policy. He realized that China's total dominance over key materials like gallium and germanium provided the necessary leverage to keep his Southeast Asian partners online and productive when the West attempted this aggressive decoupling. The stability provided by a secure supply chain, it translates directly to reliable production, to job security, and to the survival for his firm and his partners in the global South.
This strategic vision also extends beyond domestic controls, right? It involves securing vital imports of heavy rare earth elements, which is where the Myanmar strategy comes into play.
Absolutely. China has strategically leveraged Myanmar's rare earth resources as a critical, diversified component of its global supply chain dominance. Myanmar is a significant global supplier of heavy rare earth minerals. These are the materials hardest to source outside of China. Recent data confirms its importance. It shows that Myanmar accounts for a substantial 57% of China's total rare earth imports, particularly those critical heavy minerals like dysprosium and terbium. By relying heavily on external diversified sources like Myanmar for the raw material, China can aggressively stockpile these resources domestically to bolster its strategic reserves.
I have to ask, though, doesn't this heavy reliance on Myanmar, a nation that's facing extreme internal political instability, doesn't that introduce another massive point of failure for China's supply chains? Doesn't it potentially undercut their entire resilience narrative?
That is a critical question, and it really highlights the calculated risk that's involved here. While internal instability in Myanmar is a geopolitical reality, China views it as a manageable risk, and it's offset by two strategic factors. First, they focus on securing specific border supply routes, often working through established regional economic zones to ensure a continuous flow of raw material. Second, The type of minerals sourced from Myanmar, specifically the heavy rare earths, are essential for high-temperature and high-performance applications, and the global alternatives are few, and they're very difficult to scale quickly. This move allows China to secure access to these irreplaceable heavy minerals while, at the same time, imposing strict export controls on its own local supplies. This dual approach ensures both resource security via Myanmar and global market dominance via export control. It just reinforces their strategic resilience against any external shocks.
Let's pivot now to where the global manufacturing capital physically moved. The U.S. tariff wall, which was intended to isolate China, has had this counterintuitive effect of acting as a massive industrial boost for the entire Southeast Asian region. This is evidenced by just staggering investment figures. Chinese manufacturing foreign direct investment, or FDI, into ASEAN nearly tripled. It soared from about $12.5 billion in 2017 to $37.3 billion in 2023. This represents a tangible shift of factories, of technology, and of capital away from concentrated areas and toward ASEAN nations, seeking these lower-cost, politically neutral production bases.
And that shift is deeply rooted in clear economic arithmetic. Southeast Asia offers lower labor costs than coastal China. It has rapidly improving infrastructure and, crucially, a network of trade agreements that maintains reliable access to the U.S. market. Even with the new reciprocal tariffs that ASEAN countries negotiated in 2025, which settled around 19 to 20%, much lower than the initial 40% threats, that tariff gap remains the primary economic incentive driving the relocation. Manufacturers who are seeking to avoid the 100% tariffs on goods directly sourced from China are setting up final assembly and testing operations in places like Vietnam and Malaysia to qualify for those preferential ASEAN rates. We are seeing real factories, state-of-the-art warehouses, and advanced training centers relocating to industrial parks all across the region.
And within this rapidly growing region, you have these established powerhouses that are leading the charge, specializing in different parts of the complex semiconductor value chain. Singapore, for example, is not just about assembly.
No. Singapore has long cemented its status as the region's innovation hub. It focuses on the highly specialized, high-margin end of the industry. So Singapore contributes a respectable 11% of global semiconductor output, but its true influence is felt upstream. It contributes an incredible 20% of worldwide semiconductor equipment production. This means Singapore is not just making chips, it's making the highly specialized multi-million-dollar machinery that allows other nations to manufacture chips. Controlling the equipment is a critical enabler of global manufacturing capabilities.
That distinction, 11% of output versus 20% of equipment, that feels key. Why is the equipment figure a stronger indicator of Singapore's global influence?
Because controlling the equipment means you control the ability of others to manufacture. If you produce the precision lithography tools or the deposition tools, you are indispensable to every fabrication plant globally. And Singapore's strategic focus on the equipment and advanced materials side is highlighted by a major technical leap in 2025. The launch of the National Semiconductor Translation and Innovation Center for Gallium Nitride, or NSC-GaN. This is the region's first facility capable of producing advanced 6-inch gallium nitride wafers on silicon carbide and 8-inch GaN on silicon wafers.
And why is gallium nitride technology so important for the future of tech?
GaN is revolutionary because it handles much higher voltages and temperatures than traditional silicon, and it can switch electricity much faster. This makes it absolutely essential for modern high-power applications. Specifically, the efficient power management needed in 5G base stations, the inverters and converters for EV charging and motors, and the enormous power requirements of next-generation data centers. By establishing this facility, Singapore is cementing its place in the elite global group that's capable of producing these critical next-generation high-performance components, not just regional assembly.
And meanwhile, you have Malaysia, often called the Silicon Valley of the East, which continues to dominate the middle and back end of the production chain.
Oh yeah, Malaysia is the undisputed assembly, testing, and packaging champion. It commands 13% of global back-end manufacturing capacity. This phase, often called Assembly, Testing, and Packaging, or ATP, is critically important for adding value and ensuring quality control before a chip ever goes into a device. In 2024 alone, this sector generated approximately $130 billion in semiconductor exports. That cemented Malaysia's status as the world's 6th largest semiconductor exporter. This makes it an indispensable, high-value linchpin in global technology supply chains, balancing that proximity to raw materials with Western market access.
And this strategic pivot is creating intense pressure, but also immense opportunity at the personal level for entrepreneurs operating in these locations. The story of Sarah in Penang, Malaysia, it really humanizes this intense global competition.
It really does. Sarah runs a small, family-owned semiconductor packaging and testing facility there. And her life just transformed into a whirlwind after the 2025 tariff spikes. She found herself standing directly on this geopolitical fault line. She was fielding these frantic, often panicked calls from two opposite groups at the same time. American clients trying to dodge the foreign produced label by moving assembly out of China, and simultaneously from major Chinese firms looking to offshore final assembly to bypass those very same U.S. tariffs.
So she was facing a massive operational challenge then.
A massive one. To handle the new flow of complex, high-end components, she had to make this huge, risky gamble. She invested her family's entire savings to upgrade her facility, specifically installing equipment for advanced packaging techniques like flip-chip ball grid array packaging. This just illustrates the intense pressure these firms are under. They have to scale up and specialize basically overnight to capture these shifting supply chains. If Sarah succeeds, her factory becomes a critical, lucrative node in the new, diversified global supply chain. But if she fails, the cost is catastrophic. It really highlights how these national economies are being forced to scale up technologically very quickly to survive the crossfire of this global trade war.
And beyond these established hubs, other nations are emerging with highly ambitious and specialized strategies to capture new investment and carve out their own distinct niches.
Vietnam is a standout example of strategic specialization and national commitment. In 2024, they formally adopted this ambitious C equals S set plus one roadmap. The C stands for chip, S for specialized, E for electronics, T for talent, and the plus one positions Vietnam as a new safe destination, a politically neutral, reliable alternative in the global supply chain. Phase 1 of this roadmap, running from 2024 to 2030, is explicitly designed to target over $25 billion in annual revenues and, crucially, to form a specialized workforce of 50,000 engineers and technicians. And this national ambition is being backed by major international players, including significant strategic investments from Samsung and NVIDIA, which signals a lot of confidence in Vietnam's future role.
And what about Thailand and the Philippines? They're adapting their existing industrial strengths to fit these new requirements.
Right. Thailand is focusing intensely on power electronics and automotive components. These are critical components for the exploding electric vehicle market and the massive build-out of new data centers. The government has aggressively backed this specialization with a specific, measurable goal to attract $14.7 billion in new investment by 2029 and to train 80,000 semiconductor personnel specifically for these advanced industries. Meanwhile, the Philippines is leveraging its existing deep expertise in the high-volume assembly, testing, and packaging, or ATP, sector, which already accounts for over 50% of its national exports. They're strengthening this position through regional strategic partnerships to enhance their capacity and quality control.
And the shift isn't just happening in isolation. Regional economic unity is a vital driver. How are the ASEAN nations cementing their collaboration with China to ensure their stability in this new environment?
We saw the commitment to collaboration on prominent display at the Global Chinese Economic and Technology Summit 2025 in Kuala Lumpur. Malaysia, in its capacity as ASEAN chair for that year, emphasized China's pivotal role in global digitalization and noted the simple, powerful economic fact that China has remained Malaysia's #1 trading partner for 16 consecutive years. The strategic focus now is less on competition and more on collaboration centered on these future-facing sectors, driven by what China terms its new quality and productive forces.
That phrase, new quality and productive forces, that feels like a crucial piece of jargon. Can you define what that actually means in the context of China-ASEAN collaboration?
Yeah, this is a core policy concept from Beijing, and it signifies a major economic shift. It means moving beyond the traditional model of high-volume, low-cost manufacturing toward a new era that's focused on innovation, high-tech sectors, and quality output. For ASEAN partners, this translates into collaboration in specific advanced areas: artificial intelligence development, blockchain technology, quantum computing, and green technology, especially high-end batteries. It ensures that China is not just relocating old factories, but is actively collaborating on next-generation technology, which is essential for regional stability and economic advancement. It makes the partnership durable and mutually beneficial.
The Digital Silk Road, or DSR, is often framed as this grand geopolitical project. But at its core, it's really about building the fundamental infrastructure, the digital pipes and wires, that facilitates the deeper economic integration we've been discussing. So how exactly does the DSR fit into this new protectionist tech landscape?
The DSR has rapidly accelerated its position as a key pillar of the broader Belt and Road Initiative, really driven by necessity. Its elevated status in China's global strategy is shaped by two powerful reinforcing factors. The primary push factor is the staggering growth of China's own domestic digital economy, which reached $6.37 trillion by 2022. This enormous domestic demand forces Chinese tech giants to seek overseas market expansion. The pull factor is China's recognition of a significant digital gap in many developing countries, particularly in Southeast Asia, where insufficient infrastructure and localized digital tools restrict their digital economy growth and prevent them from fully participating in this global digital transformation.
So the DSR represents a systematic, collaborative effort to fill this gap by building and upgrading digital infrastructure for these recipient countries. What's structurally unique about the DSR compared to the traditional state-driven Belt and Road Initiative projects?
Well, unlike the traditional BRI, which was often characterized by being dominated by state-owned enterprises and sovereign loans, the DSR is uniquely characterized by being overwhelmingly led by China's private sector tech companies. Detailed analysis shows that private companies, with giants like Huawei, Alibaba Cloud, Tencent Cloud, and ZTE, leading the charge account for nearly 79% of DSR projects in Southeast Asia.
79%.
Right. This structure signifies an expansion of China's strategy. The government facilitates the policy, but private capital and technological expertise are the ones executing this rapid regional transformation, which broadens the global market for these powerful Chinese tech firms.
And where are these massive investments clustered geographically across Southeast Asia? What specific types of infrastructure are they prioritizing?
The DSR investments are laser-focused on core digital infrastructure and platform technology, specifically in telecoms, 5G network rollout, data centers, fintech platforms, and e-commerce enablement. Geographically, Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia are the top three destinations, collectively securing over 52% of all DSR projects between 2017 and 2020. The data center build-out is particularly illustrative of this scale. Chinese companies have constructed 43 data centers in the region, with Singapore hosting 32.5%, Indonesia 25.6%, and Malaysia 16.3%. This build-out is critical for data localization and digital sovereignty, and is driven by major cloud providers like Huawei Cloud and Alibaba Cloud.
And beyond the cloud, physical connectivity, the fundamental digital plumbing, remains essential for this level of integration. What role are they playing in laying the fiber optic groundwork?
Fiber optic cables are the crucial arteries for ensuring high-speed digital flow, and they are a massive focus for China's DSR strategy. This involves vast investments in both cross-land and submarine cables. Companies like China Unicom and HMN Tech, the latter formerly owned by Huawei, are key players in this physical integration. For instance, China Unicom initiated the SEA H2X submarine cable and invested heavily in the Asia Direct cable. Once completed, these massive infrastructure projects will physically integrate Southeast Asian countries into a cohesive, high-speed Asia-Pacific cable network, providing the essential, resilient physical backbone for the region's shared digital future. And this deep integration is best understood not through macro statistics, but through its practical, on-the-ground impact for the end user. The story of Samchai, a rice farmer in rural Thailand, is a perfect illustration of utility winning out over ideology.
Tell us about Samchai. What was his experience with this geopolitical shift?
So Samchai used to rely on an expensive, high-end, US-based agricultural technology platform for precision farming, monitoring soil, weather, crop yield. However, the 2025 tariff wars caused his annual subscription prices, which were tied to US hardware and software, to just skyrocket, making the platform financially prohibitive. Faced with losing his data and his hard-won competitive edge, he pragmatically switched to a smart farming solution offered by a joint venture between a Thai telecom company and a major Chinese tech giant. The new system was not only cheaper and more affordable, but crucially, its integrated AI was specifically trained on Southeast Asian climate patterns, localized pest threats, and rice cultivation techniques, not the generic American Corn Belt models that struggled with that regional nuance.
So what was his view on the trade tensions that caused this unexpected switch for him?
Samchai's view was entirely pragmatic. He was focused on immediate, tangible benefits. He simply remarked, "I don't care about the flag on the machine. I care that it works when the rain comes." This highlights a fundamental truth that's driving the DSR's success. For end users in the developing world, utility, affordability, and local optimization often trump ideological or geopolitical considerations. When technological protectionism from traditional suppliers raises costs or makes U.S. products less adaptable to local conditions, the DSR offers practical, effective, and increasingly localized alternatives. And this deepens technological integration across Asia based on shared economic necessity. And to ensure this massive digital shift is durable and long-lasting, China has established formal institutional mechanisms to facilitate regional technological partnerships that go far beyond just company-to-company deals.
What are some of these mechanisms that solidify the framework for long-term collaboration and standardization?
These frameworks ensure the integration is deep, it's standardized, and it's sustained. They include high-level agreements like the ASEAN China Initiative on Enhancing Cooperation on E-commerce, which was established in 2023, and the foundational China-ASEAN Digital Economy Partnership Initiative. On the physical infrastructure side, they've established the China-ASEAN Information Harbor, or CAH, to transform Guangxi into a major digital hub that acts as the physical and regulatory nexus connecting China and ASEAN. Furthermore, there's significant investment in human capital. Programs like Huawei's long-running Seeds for the Future and extensive localized cybersecurity training programs in nations like Malaysia are actively supporting the region's rapid 5G growth by ensuring a steady, skilled workforce is in place to maintain and operate all this new infrastructure. If we synthesize everything we've covered, the severe tariff shock, the resulting market chaos, and the subsequent strategic responses, the central theme is clear. Global tech protectionism, triggered by attempts at decoupling, has had the counterintuitive effect of accelerating a profound and irreversible shift in the global technology landscape.
The intended consequence of isolating supply chains has instead created this fierce, immediate global rush to find resilience and stability. And that resilience is being found in a durable, strategic alignment between China and Southeast Asia.
Exactly. This instability has decisively pushed global manufacturing investment southward, away from traditional hubs and into ASEAN nations. Simultaneously, it has solidified the region's technological reliance on and deep integration with China's increasingly resilient supply chains. This resilience is backed by China's continuous indigenous chip efforts and its strategic, undeniable control over essential rare earth resources and processing capacity. The move is away from fragile dependence on single traditional suppliers and toward diversified, regionalized production models that prioritize stability and mutual economic advancement, demonstrating an enduring strength in Asian supply chains.
Ultimately, the future belongs to those who successfully view technological engagement not as a binary choice dictated by geopolitical rivals, but as a strategic opportunity to secure both stability and economic advancement. Nations that are successfully leveraging these trade tensions to invest in talent, in next-generation infrastructure, and coordinated regional strategies like Vietnam with its CSET +1 roadmap or Singapore with its advanced GAN facility are transforming rapidly. They are moving beyond their traditional role as mere assembly hubs and establishing themselves as genuine innovation leaders in the global technology arena. This strong trend suggests that while the new era of geopolitical tension may attempt to define the rules of the road for technology, the actual digital and manufacturing infrastructure, the paving of the road, is increasingly being accomplished through deepening collaboration across the Asian continent.